Bryce Young has had an incredible career at Alabama and was able to well solidify himself as one of, if not the best player coming into the 2023 NFL Draft. Young showed a ton of talent, mobility, and a good arm, but he comes with some big worries too. With the draft fast approaching, it sounds like Young is going to be one of the first names off the board. But why? And what did he do at Alabama that has scouts swooning over him? Bryce Young was the highest rated quarterback and number 2 overall player in the 2020 recruiting class. Young played his last 2 high school seasons at Mater Dei High School in California, and Young originally committed to USC before eventually signing with Alabama. Young won a lot of awards in his senior season, including 2019 California Gatorade Player of the Year and All-American Bowl Offensive MVP. In Tuscaloosa, Young backed up Mac Jones as a true freshman, throwing for 156 yards and a touchdown in 9 games in 2020. In 2021, Young earned the starting spot. In Week 1 against Miami, he threw for 344 yards and 4 touchdowns, both school records for a debut as a starter. Young never slowed down, finishing his sophomore season with more than 4,800 yards passing and 47 touchdowns. Both of those marks were school records and also earned him the Heisman Trophy. In the postseason, Young accounted for 461 yards and 4 touchdowns in an SEC title game win over number 1 Georgia. In a rematch with the Bulldogs in the national championship game, Young threw for 360 yards and a touchdown, but he also threw 2 key interceptions in the loss. As a junior in 2022, Young didn't quite reach the heights he did as a sophomore, though he did still throw for more than 3,300 yards and 32 touchdowns. He didn't start against Texas A&M after spraining his throwing shoulder, but he came back a week later to throw for 455 yards and 2 touchdowns in a shootout loss to Tennessee. Alabama missed the college football playoffs in 2022, but Young finished his college career by winning Sugar Bowl MVP and also finished second in school history with 8,300 career passing yards and 80 touchdowns. I think one of the things that makes Bryce Young so intriguing is that he really does have every X factor. He's a smart guy and has a very high football IQ, and his instincts are top notch, and he can even produce when a play breaks down with his elite speed. He can make things happen even under pressure and can be the true leader needed for a team no matter the situation. There has been a pretty similar argument against most Alabama quarterbacks about how they get to play around a ton of talent. And yes, there was a ton of talent, but Young did lose his top 2 wide receivers, Jameson Williams and John Mechie, to the NFL Draft. They each had over 1,100 yards, and Williams had over 1,500. Then, despite not having a wide receiver with even 700 yards in 2022, Young still put up similar numbers. Overall, Bryce Young is a very good and sound passer. He has good mechanics and can scan the field well. You can see him going through his reads when he needs to, but if there's a guy open, he'll find him. I think one of the biggest things that you can see on film from him is his accuracy. There's a pretty good chance that Young is the most accurate passer in the class, and that goes for just about everywhere on the field. He can hit wherever he needs to, but his arm strength isn't anything crazy. I mean, it's not bad, but it's far from elite. He doesn't have an absolute cannon like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, but it's not even on par with CJ Stroud either. The arm strength isn't amazing, but it also isn't too bad. The big knock on Young is size. I've heard a bunch of different pro comparisons for Bryce Young, but there's a very clear similarity between the top names: Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, and Kyler Murray. I don't love the Brees comp just because Young does have a better arm and is more mobile, but I do understand the Russ and Kyler comps. Young is smaller than normal quarterbacks by quite a bit. He's 5'10" and 1/8 inches and 204 pounds. There have been past smaller quarterbacks that have struggled to see over the line, and that worries teams. But even more than that, he's likely more prone to injuries. Young already missed time in 2022 with a shoulder injury, and that could scare some teams off too. I do have a few plays that I think give a good idea of what kind of player Bryce Young could be. For one, he made some great throws in the Sugar Bowl versus Kansas State, but I couldn't find the All-22 anywhere, so we're settling for the regular season. He has the accuracy and arm, and when he sets his feet, he's great. Young does that here against Auburn. He has time in the pocket and is able to step up and deliver a great ball to Jermaine Burton, who ran a deep post. Now, it's nothing flashy, but it's a good touch and anticipation, and that's what he can bring to the table as a passer. But he's far more valuable because of his ability when the play breaks down. One of the best plays that I could find as an example came from LSU. 3 wide receivers out wide left and 1 to the right. LSU ends up bringing the house, and even a defensive back comes down to join the rush. Young breaks 1 tackle and ends up in between a couple of LSU defenders before he breaks another tackle and gets out into space to the right before finding Jermaine Burton for a touchdown. Not only is it a great play and escape, but he was even able to keep his eyes downfield and find Burton. Finally, I feel like I have to show what he can do purely with his legs. One of my favorite runs from last season was early on against Utah State. It's a play action pass, and Young looks around but doesn't see anything before seeing a lane and taking off to the left side, and he was off to the races. He outran a bunch of Utah State defenders before getting way downfield. Just a little sneak peek of what he's capable of. It's no secret that the top 2 quarterbacks in the class are currently viewed as Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, and it seems like it really just depends on who you ask. Both Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah just put out their 3rd mock drafts, and the top 2 is similar. It's just not the same. Daniel Jeremiah has Bryce Young slated as the 1st overall pick to the Panthers, and he expects him to be the best of the bunch and ultimately be the pick for the Panthers after Carolina does their homework. That being said, Mel Kiper has CJ Stroud going number 1, leaving Bryce Young at 2 to the Texans. Kiper said he thinks Houston could just stay put at 2 and still get their top-rated guy. The Texans are in a full reset, and Bryce Young could be that face of the franchise that Houston needs to go after. As for me, I feel like I kinda gotta go with Mel Kiper. I do ultimately think that Bryce Young goes 2nd overall to the Texans. Since Carolina has traded for the 1st overall pick, the 2 hot quarterbacks that have been discussed are CJ Stroud and really Anthony Richardson. I don't think the Panthers go that route, but it feels like maybe Bryce Young isn't their guy, unless it's just a big smokescreen. Houston is obviously rebuilding, but I do think DeMeco Ryans is going to build a good culture. Also, John Mechie will likely be back after he didn't play as a rookie following his cancer diagnosis, so he would get to play with his old quarterback from Alabama. Overall, I think Bryce Young is a very good prospect. He has a lot of tools that make him so appealing, and he can extend plays. He really fits the mold of what a top quarterback in today's league could be really well. I know the height thing is a worry, and I do think that's understandable. Young is already coming off of having shoulder problems last season, and I would be very worried about him being banged up. But the Texans did just give Laramie Tunsil another big deal for a reason. Now it's just time to fix the rest of the line, because Houston doesn't want to ruin Bryce Young, because he could be the real deal.